from me. We are neighbors, way back. The Board of Education of the School District of the Menominee area recognizes Rita Devery for her 26 years of dedicated service to the students, staff, and the Menominee area school district community. Congratulations and thank you. Deanna Selman. My first brush with Deanna was homecoming film. You remember that?
I do.
We were riding in the truck together. So. Okay, the Board of Education of the School District of the Menominee area recognizes Deanna Stillman for her 19 years of dedicated service to the students, staff, and the Menominee area school district community. Thank you. Harold Velchek. Mr. Velchek currently has my freshman son Brian in his class. He's enjoying it thoroughly. The Board of Education of the School District of the Menominee area recognizes Harold Velchek for his 28 years of dedicated service to the students, staff, and the Menominee area school district community. Thank you. I'm not going to say anything better. The Board of Education of the School District of the Menominee area recognizes Jamie Christa for 28 years of dedicated service to the students, staff, and the Menominee area school district community. Thank you, Jamie. And last but not least, Michael Larson.
Yeah.
The Board of Education of the School District of the Menominee area recognizes Michael Larson for his 25 years of dedicated service to the student, staff, and the Menominee area school district community. Thank you, Mr. Larson. Board members, if any of you have any
I'm
comments?
going to stand up just because this has been a heck of a year. And I just want to stand up and just give you a standing ovation because I think you all did a wonderful job. And I appreciate all your work and all your service to the district. Thank you.
I agree with that. Any other quick stories? I mean, we know about the Science Olympiad and all the, there's so much that this group has accomplished.
My stepdaughters only did good in chemistry in college because of you. They said it was a piece of cake after having me.
Thank you, all of you, very much for everything that you've given to the district. So we appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, moving on. Student representative communication. So, please sit down and use the mic.
Hi, okay. So for sports and activities this month, spring sports have officially started and teams are working really hard to improve their skills and compete within the BRC and then work towards playoffs, which are going to be in June this year. And this year's seasons are a little bit shorter than normal, so many athletes are working hard to make quick but lasting improvements. MHS will be hosting a spring play this year, the worst 9 breakups of all time, and rehearsals have already started, but students are encouraged to get involved with this production in a multitude of ways other than just being a part of the cast. Ms. Shores would like to add that although this year looked very different compared to other years, the Menominee DECA chapter had an excellent showing for the 2021 DECA ICDC. 4 students qualified to compete at the national level. Mesa Wilson, myself, competed in apparel and accessories marketing. Chloe Ayler competed in business services, and Aaron and Lauren McNally competed in the entrepreneurship series. Students had to complete exam and 2 role plays for their respective events. Chloe Ayler placed in the top 20 for the business services. She was one of 40 other Wisconsin DECA members recognized as finalists at the national level. And then forensics wrapped up their season after competing at the state level in late April. The team won the Excellence in Speech Award, and many members also placed individually. Science Olympiad ended their season by placing third in the state competition as a team, and many students placed in their individual events as well. The Student Council will be hosting elections for next year's class leadership positions within the coming weeks. Our club has been meeting regularly, and they will be tie-dyeing t-shirts in the near future. The FFA Club competed virtually at CDEs, and they also hosted the latest competition, the LEDs at the LDEs at the high school.
Hi, I'm going to be talking about other things that are happening in school right now. So last week, the first round of AP tests started. Students have been taking extra time to study and prepare for these tests to receive college credit in the courses that they have been taking all year long. Seniors are excited for graduation. The grad committee has been sending out surveys to collect information from seniors for the senior slideshow. They have been sending in baby pictures and pictures from all throughout high school. The senior committee has been raffling off prizes for seniors every Monday because they were unable to host the lock-in this year. Every Friday for the rest of the year is a Funky Friday. During these Funky Fridays, music is being played in the hallways, there are dress-up days, and there are soccer giveaways. And then lots of students were really glad that they were able to attend prom, and they had a lot of fun being there.
Do you guys have any questions?
I have just one.
Sure.
What are you guys' plans as you move on?
I'll go first. I will be attending Augsburg University in Minneapolis and majoring in business administration and then minoring in Spanish.
I'm going to be attending the University of Minnesota Duluth for biochemistry, and I'm hoping to pursue a career in the medical field.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Very good. Thank you.
Today is our last report,
Yeah.
so we'll give you guys new representatives. We'll shape for you.
Great job.
Thank you very much. Thanks for everything this past year. Okay, move on. Community communications. I didn't receive any. Jamie, nothing? Okay. Board member, superintendent communications. Board members. Joe. Okay, revenue and expense reports for the month ending April 2021. Yeah.
Okay, we'll take a look at the revenue report first, if you'd like to open that. So for the month of April, we received in our Common School Fund library aid from the state. That was the one revenue we received there. Overall, for our General Fund 10, we received it in $25,419,978.70. For our Fund 21 account, we received in $192,068.60, and then for our Fund 27, our special education fund, we received in $1,488,125.82. Our revenues are right on track for this time of year. The one revenue account that I had mentioned, I believe last month, was our admissions account is down significantly, but that's because we weren't, able to hold the events. Any other questions? Okay, then moving on to our April expenses by function report. This is for our General Fund 10. The percent spent for April is 60.99% compared to 57.84%. And then in Funds 27, we're at 68.8% compared to 70.30%, so that's slightly down from last year. And then Fund 50, our food service account, we're at 75.47% compared to 73.95%. And then our expenses broken down by object for all the funds. Our percent spent fiscal year to date, we're at 70.98% compared to last year. At this time, we were at 62.91. I listed a few notes at the bottom of what's affected this year compared to last year. And the big one was that debt service refinancing. That's why our percentage is so much higher this year than last year. And then we've had some, couple equipment purchases this year in food service. There was some ovens that were replaced that were over 25 years old. So our equipment account is a little higher this year than last year. Any questions?
Okay, thanks, Leo. Moving on to a monthly employment report. Any questions on that? Okay, moving on to the consent agenda. I'd like a motion to approve the consent agenda. Chris, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Angie? The consent agenda consists of our minutes from a regular board meeting from April 12th, our board reorganizational meeting from April 26th, and our special board meeting on April 26th. We have the financial reports, donations, none for this time, and then our corrected hourly wage scale and corrected substitute ESS pool field house wage schedules for 2021-2022. Any questions? Okay, Jamie?
Tanya, are you voting electronically?
Yes, can I do verbal, Jamie, if that's okay?
Is it coming through electronically, Tanya?
No, it's not.
Yes, go ahead and do a verbal then.
Yes.
Thank you.
And just as a point of order, Tanya, or clarification, if there's anything, if you want to speak because you're not here, it's always a little difficult when you're not in the room, but you're going to have to just butt in.
Yeah. Yep,
So-
I can. I'm good. Thank you, Dave.
Okay, motion carries 9-0. Moving on to the action item, 4A, approve SDMA COVID, personnel consent agenda. Action to approve personnel actions. Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Angie, is there a second?
I second.
Tanya? Joe?
I just want to point out to board members that there was a late addition to this list. Renee Olson will be retiring as Menominee High School attendance secretary. Typically, an hourly resignation or retirement would not come before the board. However, due to the deadlines and due to the notice period and personal situations, we are recommending the approval of a special waiver of the required 120-day notice.
Any questions? Okay, Jamie? Tanya?
Yes, I approve.
Thank you. Motion carries 9-0. Now moving on to the action agenda. Item 4A, approve SDMA COVID-19 instructional plan for the 2021-2022 year. Is there a motion to approve?
I so move.
Carl, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Amy, second. Okay, we did discuss this some at our last board meeting. Does you have anything you wanted to add?
I think we covered it pretty well last time, but essentially it's the same type of plan for next year in terms of providing a virtual option for families and an in-person option.
Any other questions or discussion from the board? Chris?
Yeah, a couple things that we discussed was trying to understand transitions, and I know that was caused some confusion in the last COVID reopening plan. And I know that Carl asked some questions about what those kind of thresholds look like and whatnot. And I know that we were going to try to add those as we got more information about new CDC guidelines and the new science that's coming in terms of what is, proper distancing and whatnot. But it would be nice if the reopening plan that we're approving had some, at least, intentionality of building those questions or those critical areas of concern for our parents and for our students into the plan we're voting on right now. So I was a little sad to see that there wasn't any incorporation of that line of questioning from the last meeting. And then also we noticed that to have the reopening plan, the formal one coming out 3 days after the deadline for the virtual, that was a poor timing. And that the parents that need to make the decision about whether or not their kids are going to be returning to school because they feel their school is safe, they need to have that reopening formal plan before they make that decision. And we had discussed moving that date, but it's the same date that we had the last time. Does that make sense to everybody?
I feel like the last time we discussed this is just the instructional plan. This isn't like the reopening or the COVID mitigation or anything like that. This is just how we intend to offer instruction to the students. Am I wrong?
You're correct, Angie, and the full reopening plan will be brought before the board on July 26th. It won't be brought for approval until August. We want to wait as long as we can because obviously things are going to continue to change with the pandemic. We're finding out potential vaccine accessibility for people maybe even down to 2 years old could be coming sooner than what originally thought. So I think we have enough information to move forward and let people know what it is that we're expecting. But like we talked about the last meeting, as much as we can try to plan ahead, as clear as our crystal ball might be, we're still going to have to innovate based on new variants or the circumstances that face us next year. But this is simply the instructional plan providing an opportunity to have families choose virtual or in-person learning.
Do you think, Joe, that having that board meeting the 26th of July where we discussed our reopening plan more in depth is going to give parents and families enough time to make that August 6th deadline for choosing virtual?
I do, especially with the number of families. I mean, it's been such low interest in our preliminary survey to families. I think a lot of people already know what they're going to do, and that's why we're having an early application here at the end of the school year. And for those people who might want to wait through the summer and see how circumstances might change, we're going to have the midsummer, end of the summer registration available as well.
Chris?
Yeah, this is just a follow-up question. I noticed that there actually was a lot of last-minute changes that parents were making because of the information that came out, and getting that final plan after they make their application deadline seems to be the sticking point, in the sense that's just a few days difference. But I think we were open in the last meeting to changing those deadlines or adjusting them slightly to make sure that parents knew exactly what they were buying into before they have their deadline for the virtual application.
Well, I don't think parents will know exactly what they're buying into no matter when we have the deadline. And we can set the deadline earlier if that's what the board would like, but if we do that, please understand that the plan is probably going to have to change more often. The earlier we set it, the more it's probably going to have to change.
Okay, any other discussion? Okay, Jamie? Tanya?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Did it come up for you, Chris?
It's not coming up for me. I can just do a voice vote, and so no.
Motion carries by an 8-to-1 vote. Action item 4B, approve 2021 summer school staffing incentive. This is something that's new on the agenda this time. Joe?
Right, and I know that we've sent the board members information about this, but we're looking to have a very robust summer school program like we've had in the past. In the initial staffing figures, we are quite short of staff. And I think a lot of it has to do with fatigue. I also think a lot of it has to do with, staff members not having the opportunity to do much during the year like everyone else, and giving up a portion of the summer is difficult. So what we're proposing is a special summer school staffing incentive. I appreciate the work that Brian Seguin did on this, along with Samantha Hoyt and our summer school coordinator, Jason Mountain. And we think it's appropriate. We think this is exactly what some of the federal relief funding is meant for in terms of dealing with learning loss or unfinished learning. So the idea would be to provide a one-time incentive for any summer school teacher who teaches one session, maybe a $250 incentive. And then if we have teachers that are willing to teach both sessions, it would be a $1,000 incentive. So it's pretty comprehensive. It's a pretty big investment. But if we're going to offer a robust summer school program, like I think our community wants, then I think we're going to have to invest in that this year.
Okay, discussion?
Do we have any sense that will do it? For some teachers, it may be $1,000 isn't worth it. I'm going to take my summer off after the year we just had, so.
We talked about it a little bit today. I know Mrs. Hoyt has already talked to a few people, so we do think it's going to have a positive impact. Whether or not it staffs everything, Carl, I'm not certain, but I do think it'll get us, if not all the way there, it'll get us close.
Mark?
Do we know how short-staffed we are right now?
I believe it was about 15 teachers.
Amy, do you have something?
No.
Okay. Looked like you had questions. Anybody else?
I guess,
Mark?
just to make more sense, how many teachers do we have? So if we're short 15, do we have?
Percentage-wise?
Yes.
Sam, do you have a ballpark on that?
I'm gonna, right now.
Can you just give us a rough?
Yeah, we're
60.
probably at about 150 staff. 150 staff. Yeah, total.
Okay,
Yeah, and about 15 short.
okay.
Amy?
Does that include teachers? I mean, does that include other staff besides teachers, like food service and, or is that just teachers?
Just teachers.
Okay.
Chris?
Do we have a sense of what subjects we're talking about?
Yeah, it's kind of a variety. We have about half are enrichment. I'd say about half are enrichment and half are going to be our core academic areas. There's some special ed in there. There's also some grade level enhancements that we're looking at as well. So it's kind of across the board, and it ranges from 4-year-olds all the way up to our high school courses, remedial courses.
Any other questions?
Do we have, like when the final enrollment will be in, Ms. Mensing sent an email to the whole board today saying that her children wouldn't be attending summer school due to the COVID mitigation measures and that sort of thing. So if we have, our enrollment is down, are we not going to need that many teachers? And then what happens? Do you follow what I'm asking?
Yeah, the registration process is ongoing,
And
and we won't continue to hire staff that we won't need.
okay,
But we feel we have a pretty good projection of what is going to be needed.
okay.
Any other discussion? Okay.
Need a motion and a second one.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Angie, a second?
I'll second.
Mark, thank you. Okay. Amy? Tanya?
Yes, I do. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, motion carries by 9-0 vote. Moving on to item 4C, action to approve 2020-21 budget revisions. Motion to approve.
I'll move to approve.
Charlie, is there a second?
I'll
I'll
second.
second.
Angie? Joel?
Leah went through these last meeting, they're ready to go for approval tonight.
Any questions from board members? Okay, Jamie, let's vote. A little slow tonight, isn't it?
Yeah, board docs is, I'm getting the spinning wheel once in a while.
It's kicking you out, Mark?
It is, I lose connection.
Okay. Tanya, sorry.
Yeah,
Yes, thank you.
yeah.
Motion carries by a 9-0 vote. Action item 4D, approved transportation contract for 2021, 2022. Is there a motion? Clint, is there a second?
I'll second that.
Mark. Okay, so Joe and I, as you probably read through, sat down with Ryan and Kyle Howe on last week, Wednesday, and we discussed with them the same rate of increase that we've done for the staff, and actually had a really good meeting with them. They had talked about where they're at, cost of supplies, tires, repairs, parts, everything's going up. Some concern if the increase that we gave them was going to keep up with inflation or not, but we'll see how the year goes, but so far they're doing okay. So talked to them a little bit about how pleased we were with them working with the district, especially with the COVID year and the busing schedules and adding the extra bus in and doing what they've done to help with the routes and things of that nature. Joe, anything you'd like to add?
One thing that really stood out to me is they talked about how well received it was to have an aide riding the buses for the 4-year-old kindergarten students, and how big of a difference that made for the drivers. And they requested that as we staff for next year, we consider that. It is a big investment, but based on their feedback, it sounds like it was an investment that was well worth it.
One of the things that they also talked about with some of the 4K, I believe, was at times they had problems with when they would go to drop the kids off, if the parents weren't home or awake or something like that, and they'd have to make the loop back around or take the kids back to school. So there's a little bit of, but we talked that through, and I think they're going to work on tracking it a little bit better, so that if we have habitual offenders, and as far as parents not being there for the kids and stuff, that we can, as a district, address that and kind of take it off their plate a little bit. So. Any questions?
When I was a kid, they'd lay on the horn, took care of it.
Yeah, now they get phone calls, everybody's got a phone, so the bus driver's honking, and after a couple times, pretty soon they're calling the district and saying, hey, what's up?
Realistically though, was there any other change to this language other than the percent increase, or is this our standard process?
This is the standard contract we've had.
Mark?
Two things, but I just start with number one, obviously. You mentioned inflation and the cost of goods. If that happens to go up, is this contract something that can be revised or relooked at down the road to compensate for that if it gets too far out of whack? Or or once we approve this, is this something that is in it for the school year? And then obviously the bus company would assume all liabilities, cost of goods, whatever. You want to answer that, and then I got another one.
So I would say, Mark, the intent of the contract is for the year. And most years, that hasn't even been a discussion point. But there are some things with the monthly CPI that are concerning to Menominee Transportation, and frankly, they're concerning to the school district. And that was a point of discussion that we had, because even though the CPI for the 12 months was 1.26, Leah, is that what it was?
I believe so.
Just the most recent months have been like double that. So we did talk with the House, and in the event that inflation really takes off, like some people are predicting, we did agree that we could come back mid-year and have a discussion about that. No promises were made other than the fact that we would be open to having a discussion about it.
Sure. And then real quick, the second thing is, as far as fuel, gas prices go, obviously they're going to continue to go up for the foreseeable future. Is that something that is included in this as those prices go up? Are they compensated for that, I guess is my question.
So the contract does cover the increase in fuel prices, and it's in section 2B. And I know it's a little bit confusing, and Leah could step through it in detail if anybody wants that detail, either at the meeting or after the meeting. But the short answer is essentially the baseline is $1.25 per gallon, and then as fuel adjusts up or down, I can't imagine going that low, but as it goes up, there are escalators in the contract to cover that cost. So it's not like signing this contract or approving this contract could put the district or the transportation company in jeopardy on fuel prices that, like you said, a lot of people are expecting that to go up.
The fuel side of it was not a concern for them, or, it was more on the everything else.
Yep. Thank you.
Yep. Amy?
I was just going to clarify, it said right in the contract that if it went over $1.25, that we could negotiate. So.
Okay, thank you. Clint?
Well, we got two things, and I'd be remiss not to mention that Menominee Transportation was recognized by the Chamber as the Business of the Year for their efforts, which was kind of a big deal with everything they went through. And then something I don't even know if Leah knows, but there's actually an amendment to the governor's budget that would include an increase in transportation aid. And I actually have the calculations and the numbers, how it would affect all the schools in my area. But it would be a positive impact, although it's not a huge amount, but it would positively impact our budget. Of course, it's just an amendment at this stage, so who knows what's going to happen, but that would directly affect transportation aid as well. And I do have the calculations that I could probably share with you or Joe at some point.
Leah, any comments, or are you okay? Okay. I asked Joe, go ahead, Joe.
Dave also reminded me too, kind of along the lines, Dave Howe, Ryan and Kyle's father, we had worked with Dave for so many years, and there's going to be a dedication ceremony down at Wakanda Park on Friday, June 11th, 2 o'clock, and they're going to be dedicating Toby's fan deck, and that's something that's really exciting. I know that Kyle and Ryan, we talked to them about that, and I think they know how much their dad meant to us, and I know that we're all invited, the public's invited, and if anybody can make that event, that'd be terrific.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Any other discussion on the transportation contract before we vote? Okay, Jamie? Tanya?
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is anybody getting it?
I got mine.
Yeah, mine.
Okay, mine. Oh, mine. Okay, which now?
Just keep it. Who does not have the vote yet? Anybody?
Nothing's come back to me yet.
Should we do roll call? Okay, go ahead, Jamie.
Amy?
Yes.
Dave?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Clint?
Yes.
Tanya, I have yours. Charlie?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
And
Angie and Carl, yours just came through.
Yeah, mine did.
It's 9-0.
Okay, motion carries 9-0. We apologize, board docs is having a little issue again. Okay, we'll move on to the discussion items, policy review. We'll start with item 5A, COVID-19 report. Dr. Zadowski.
So thankfully, the numbers in Dunn County have come down. The burden at the last measurement was about half of what it was the last time we had a school board meeting. There are currently 41 active cases in Dunn County, 2 residents hospitalized. Dunn County still is in the high area, however, in terms of burden and disease activity. Percent positivity has dropped, however, though under 5%, which is low, so that's good. About 37% of the population has received at least 1 dose of the vaccination, and 31% has completed the vaccination series. I already mentioned we are looking forward to additional vaccine access. People are anticipating this week that access for the vaccination, the Pfizer vaccination, may be authorized for people 12 years old or older. I did not see that today. We've been kind of waiting. Oh, you saw it today, Tonya?
Yep.
Good.
Yep.
So it came through today, and hopefully that'll help our progress towards this pandemic.
Could you repeat that, Joe, one more time?
So children 12 years old or older, and then the rest of the population that's older, will be now eligible to receive the Pfizer COVID vaccine.
Thank you.
Moderna and Johnson & Johnson, you have to be 18 or older. In terms of data sharing, data in the school district continues to look very good. There's only been 1 student case each of the past 2 weeks. So we do have 1 active student case right now, 0 active staff cases, and the exclusions have come down quite a bit as well. They weren't that high before, but we continue to watch that exclusion rate very closely. One thing we have seen is we have a number of older students, 16 years or older, who have already received the vaccine. And one thing that people might be confused with a little bit, if someone is fully vaccinated, they're no longer required to quarantine if they have a close contact, but that's assuming that they're asymptomatic. And we have had some situations where students have not felt well, which may or may not be COVID, but if it fits into the COVID symptoms, even if you've been fully vaccinated, you're still expected to follow the isolation, quarantine, and testing protocol to return to school. So the full vaccination definitely helps in terms of close contacts, but if people have symptoms, we still are under the obligation to follow that protocol. And I know that can be confusing and in some cases frustrating for people. The girls did a good job talking about the different activities going on. Saw so many neat pictures with the prom that was had at Menominee High School. It really does. It kind of gives you chills, you know, and just thinking that these kids got this great experience. And when you look at the exclusions and you look at the student cases, I was very pleased to see that there's no indication that having that prom caused any kind of spread. So, you know, every time we have an event these days, you always wonder if it's the right decision, and I think we made a really good decision on that from the way it looks. Mask use is something that we're hearing more and more about. More schools in our area are beginning to make the use of masks optional. I really encourage our board and our school district to continue with the masks through the remainder of this school year. Masks have been a very important mitigation piece. I think, you know, our numbers and what we've done help support the use of masks. I do recognize, though, that there's concern about individual freedoms. There's concerns about people being able to make the choice on that. And I guess, you know, once more people are vaccinated, or at least have the opportunity to be vaccinated, because we're not planning to force anybody to be vaccinated if they don't feel that's appropriate for themselves. But once that's available, I think it kind of gives us a signal that people have had the opportunity, and I would feel much more comfortable with it. But not only do we have to consider the fact that, you know, these students, they have not had the opportunity to become immune or have their immune system trained related to COVID. But we still have people in the community that, you know, for one reason or another, that they're not able to get the vaccination. And even though they may be eligible to have a vaccination, there are reasons why people can't. So, we're down to, I haven't been counting the days, but probably 17 days or something like that. There's not many school days left. I would highly encourage the board to continue supporting masks for the rest of the school year. But it's my understanding that, the board would like to discuss the use of masks during summer school, and that's something that we will have in the next school board meeting agenda for the board to decide. Any questions?
I did a quick comment. I was at the track meet Friday with 4 teams, parents from 4 schools, everyone wearing the mask so those kids could run. Really felt good. I don't know if any of the athletic director was there or whatever, but everyone was doing what they needed to do so that event could keep going. Good.
Thanks, Carl. Any other questions? Okay, let's move on to item B, discuss strategic plan and district work plan for 2021-2022.
So there's a proposed timeline for the school board, and you can see there that today really the intent of this discussion is to get the strategic plan back in front of you. We've been so preoccupied with the pandemic for good reason that in terms of strategic planning, in terms of developing work plans, it's been a full year since we've really been able to move more of our focus towards that. I did put a link in the very bottom of your background, especially for the new board members, to just kind of show you all the different things that went into the development of that strategic plan. There were thousands of comments through surveys and focus group meetings, and it really was a good process in terms of hearing from our community what was needed, what the community wanted to have prioritized in our schools. I understand that, with the pandemic, and things continue to change, that we need to also make sure this plan can be malleable. So the timeline I'm suggesting is review the plan today, and then in 2 weeks come back, and I would think that the structure of the plan is still good. I really think that structure should stand the test of time, at least for the near future. But if there are things in there that the board thinks that need to be prioritized, or if there's something that may not have been on our radar at that time, pre-COVID, that needs to be on there now, I think having a discussion about that on May 24th would be very good. And then no matter what, I think it's important that the board take action in June, so that we can then develop our action plan, our work plan for the 2021-2022 school year this summer, so that we can really make our plans, and the lead team can do what we need to do to operationalize the intentions of the board. So I guess at this point, are there any questions about the plan or the timeline?
Just to clarify, I'm guessing that you want feedback between now and the 24th.
Absolutely, that'd be terrific.
If we have anything to add.
My question would be a piggyback to that. Who and how do we give that feedback on this? Does it go to you, to both of you?
Ideally, Carl, I would say you could, if you want to have an initial phone call or something, and just kind of talk about some ideas, depending what it is, whether we're talking about a pillar or whether we're talking about a measurable goal, I think it kind of depends what we're talking about. And then from there, I think we would want to turn that into essentially a written proposal that we could then bring to the board for discussion and ultimately board consideration. I would suggest starting with a phone call though, so we can kind of talk it through.
It's not tearing down pillars, don't worry.
No, I don't, but you understand what I'm saying. Yeah. It depends on how big of an issue we're talking about.
Any questions from board members on the timeline? May 10th is tonight, the 24th, May 24th, discuss any desired changes to the key pillar strategies, strategic actions, deliverables, and measurable goals. Then on June 14th, approve any changes to the key pillar strategies. June 28th, board reviews the 2020-21 status update on measurable goals and the work plan for the 2021-22 school year. And July 12th, board approves the work plan for the 2021-2022 school year. Any questions on that timeline, the way it's set out? As Joel said on the strategic plan, if you do have anything that you would like to think that you want to discuss or talk about, feel free to give Joe a call. This is, for my, personally, I think it's good that we're getting back on track on this stuff and making it a focus. I'd love to see us continue down this road and work at it. So we've put a lot of work into the strategic plan.
If I could add one more thing, it's a little bit frustrating because we did all the work on the plan, and a lot of the first year work, once the plan was set, a lot of the first year is setting baselines and such, and we got to that point, and then boom, the pandemic hit. So there's a lot of lofty goals left in our plan, and a ton of work. So that's where that prioritization and having the board input is going to be very important.
Any further questions? Okay. Chris.
I got a question. So, just trying to think about how, do you think you could give a help guide, like personally for me, for my analysis, how you can kind of mesh some of these kind of first year and second year goals so we can make maybe a reprioritization of plan. So, what you believe to be the things that we most need to focus on, that we weren't able to implement in year one, and thinking about creative ways in which we could sort of make a mashup of maybe clear year one and year two goals together, and then we can give you strong feedback on like, oh, okay, I like that idea, this is some ways we can kind of bring that together in a productive way. So giving some lead in on what we lost and how we can make up on that, make good up on that. It's terrible. How we can make good on that. Would be much appreciated. So do you think you could get that to us? And if we have to discuss this at the next meeting, then if we could get like a baseline analysis on where we're at, and we can play a little catch up on that by a week from now, would that be about right? And then we could think about it before a discussion at the next meeting?
Well, I would say, Chris, that May 24th is that discussion is scheduled. So I would say a good target would be for that board docs the Thursday before that meeting.
Yeah, that sounds good.
And I'm expecting some feedback from board members, but also as a lead team with the principals and the directors, if we have some ideas, we can also bring those forward at that time.
The other thing too that I was going to add is that we could work, we're still working on your work plan. So some of this will fall into that work plan, what the work plan actually entails as well. And that's coming up more in June, so final in July. Thanks, Chris. Anything else? Okay, we'll move on to item 5C, review 2021-22 MHS student handbook.
So every year we bring the board the updated handbooks, and Mr. Drake and his team at the high school did a really good job taking any of the policies that had changed in the recent year and then melding them into the handbook and the planner. Typically we would bring all the handbooks at once, however, with some publishing deadlines, and that's what's all messed up now too with the pandemic and trying to get things on time. Mr. Drake needed to have his go in front of the board tonight. We plan to bring the elementary and middle school handbooks at a future meeting, but in order to have it published, we wanted to make sure we got that in front of the board. It's again, a nice job by the administration over there at the high school to put that together, but we wanted to just share it with you and then see if there's any questions at all.
Any questions from the board? Okay. Oh, Charlie, sorry.
So I'm looking at the student handbook agenda planner changes for 2021, 2022. The yellow highlighted areas are changes?
Correct.
Okay. It would be helpful to know within, for instance, full-time student status. There's obviously a change there, it's highlighted, but what specifically changed?
Brian, do you have any answer to that? I know that you would work with Mr. Drake on that part a little bit.
Yeah, specific to the full-time student status, that was not something that was defined in prior handbooks. And when we were looking at virtual students as well as in-person and students who in a traditional year attend both virtually and in person, it was something that we made the determination that should be clarified and added to it. So that's a new piece.
I did check on that one, Charlie, with Mr. Drake and with Mr. Segman. That is the same expectation that our district has had for years. So it's not that practice is necessarily changing, it's the fact that it's added to the handbook.
Any other questions? So we'll bring this back.
This is just an informational
Oh, okay,
update,
sorry.
there's no need for board approval.
Sorry. Okay, we'll move on to item D, SDMA environmental site update.
Well, Brian has done the lion's share of the work with the environmental site and really appreciate his leadership in that area. So Brian, why don't you go ahead and take it away, please?
All right, thank you, Joe. So for our new board members who weren't with us the last time that we did an update on the environmental site, our environmental site located out in the Knapp Hills, just over 443 acres of the school forest land. I'm not going to give you the whole history of the site out there, but we had several activities that came out of a pretty comprehensive goal process a few years ago as far as some site improvements, and felt that it was timely to come back and provide some updates on that work. But then also during the ongoing pandemic, there were some pieces that were paused, and we're in the process of getting ready to start those up again. So some key things that have happened since the last update that the board received. We have been working on updating our elementary environmental education curriculum. It's more than just activities out at the site, but that's one of the places where a lot of the activities will happen. We're trying to identify a common scope and sequence that we can identify specific expectations that all students, regardless of school, will experience, and then be able to provide that experience out at the site. We had several, we call them camper cabins, that were constructed several years ago out at the site that needed some updates. So that work continues. We're down to one cabin that we have left to re-roof and restain, so that work will take place this summer. Probably one of the biggest things that was on the last timeline that was paused. Every so often we will do a timber harvest or a timber sale out at the site. That's one way that we generate revenue for improvements and maintenance out at the site, as well as some of our programming that we deliver. And we work in partnership with the DNR Forester for our forest management plan. And in preparation for this current timber sale, after the DNR Forester went out and did what's referred to as cruising the site, going out and taking a look and evaluating the different stands, we were able this last time to involve several of our students in the marking of the trees that would be harvested. And in a logging map that's included in board docs, there are 2 stands that were included that were marked for initial harvesting. And it's 2 pine plantations, what's referred to as stand 4 and stand 8. And when the pandemic hit, there were many paper as well as lumber mills that were shut down during the pandemic. So it was recommended that we pause because there wasn't a market at that point in time for pulp to go to, as well as timber. And those mills are starting up again, so we're in the process of updating that time frame. And it's our hope that this fall we'll be going out to bid. So we paused just before the bidding process last time, and we're hoping to bid this fall, at which point we'll bring bids back and review those. We use a sealed bid process when we do that. And then based off of those bids, we usually identify 2 winters to complete the harvest. So if everything goes according to plan, what we'd be doing is we'd be looking this coming winter and the following winter would be the 2 winters that we would be doing the harvest out at the site. And because of the age of the red pine that will be coming down, if we don't harvest them now, they'll start to topple and there won't be a market for them. So what we'll end up doing is, doing thinning where we can, where that's logical, but then also doing probably a little more clear cut in some of the areas. If you've been out the site, you know the main road that drives in, that's an area that will be pretty well cleared out. And that's advantageous both because of the age of the trees, but then also because of its location to the main education spot out at the site, we'll be able to involve our students in some of the replanting and things like that when we come back. So trying to be both good stewards of the property, but then also taking a look at the educational value of the activities that we do out at this site. You'll also notice, if you look at the timeline, several other projects that are included in there that we've done going back several years, but then also looking out over the next couple of years. And then once we get this timber sale locked down, then we'll go back and in next school year we are planning to reevaluate the goals we set the last time when we did some comprehensive goal setting and identify what the next primary focus would be. Kind of the last thing that I want to touch base on, this summer, we talked about summer school a little bit earlier on. We did pause student site visits out to the site because of the pandemic. The idea of busing students out to the site on a regular basis was something that was not part of our reopening plan this fall. We are looking at piloting a summer school environmental art class out at the site as one of our first steps of getting students in groups back out to this. At this point, I'm happy to answer any questions that people have.
Mark?
Got a question, and maybe you said it and I just didn't pick up on it, but you said there's stands 4 and 8 and that kind of encompasses 7 different locations, if I'm reading the map correctly?
Yep.
And how many acres does that encompass?
That's a good question. I would have to look back, and I don't know that off the top of my head. I'd have to look back in our notes with our forester.
What is the total acreage of the site, environmental site?
443 acres.
So.
Yeah, honestly. Yeah, I would have to look at the scale, but honestly, the easiest thing would be for me to reach out to our forester, and he would know that.
Just ballparking 40 acres? Maybe?
Yeah, probably.
Something like that's a big ballpark. Just guessing. Chris?
What kind of rules do we have to follow in terms of land use and land practice out there? Because, when you start talking about clear cut, I know Dave's probably started thinking about, he wants to get some ag out there. Because he got a lot of space. But, no joking aside, there's also other land use to do an environmental site. That could be involving, solar gardens and a whole host of other ways. If we start thinking more on a more forward, proactive way about what environment means in a much more holistic kind of way. So, are there any practical barriers to the types of improvements we can put in that land that we are beholden to or governed by?
Yep, so that's a great question, Chris, and the short answer is yes. We have several different types of land that are out at the site, from wetland to prairie to obviously both hard and softwoods out there with our pine plantations, and we have some that stands that are pretty much all hardwood. So we work very closely with the DNR as to what our management plan out there is. When we look at doing something, we do involve them. If you take a look at, kind of the long section or stand 8 portion that goes out to the road, that borders the road in and out, that road actually borders a wetland. So when we did some site improvement the last time to fix that road, we actually consulted with the DNR as to, was our plan something that we could do, or would we not be okay for that? And then actually, part of our road is where it is because of its proximity to the stream that goes through. Several natural springs out there. You brought up the solar garden, and if you look on the timeline, we did partner with Dunn Energy. The board, would have to go back to the specific timeline, did approve, and we did a solar installation out at the site. So that, when Kevin was here and gave his last update, I believe he reported that 100% of the energy that's used out at the site, we were able to offset through that solar garden that we have. It's a relatively small array, but given the size that we have out there. And so we do look at those pieces. We have the ability to monitor the usage that comes through or that is captured through that solar array. I know we've run into some challenges of getting that live data into the classroom, but the idea is that that's something that then our students can actually monitor as well.
Just a quick comment on that. One of the, on our farm, we just worked with the DNR on cutting on one of our woods, and they're I like the way they do things because they look at the big picture of the woods and the health of the timber in the woods. And so in our particular case, they want to take out the trees that aren't as productive and good for the long term. So basically cutting out the scrub wood and getting that harvested out of there so that the better wood could flourish and grow. And so I'm glad that they're involved on this and making their recommendations as far as cutting and so forth. So.
Yeah, and if I could make a comment about that, stand 8 that borders the road, when we talked with the forester, right now that's pretty much all red pine, and their recommendation to us, and ultimately it's our decision, but their recommendation to us when we go to replant that is that we put 4 to 5 different species in that replanting so that it's not all the same type of wood maturing at the same time, so that you can do more of a select cut the next time as opposed to a clear cut.
Chris?
So Charlie would know a lot more about this than me. But I mean, just going into the rough estimate, like 40 acres, and you get 1 gigawatt hour per acre, per 3 acres for solar. So it's just like there's a potential for a lot of energy there, and then you can make it harmonious with a really large site that could be really instructive for students in lots of ways, especially when you're talking about bringing the data into classrooms. You can start seeing the ways that we are changing, how the SDMA actually lives in its ecology rather than how we study the ecology. So I know, and Clint would know about this more than I, but I know that there are partners that we have in the community that, are much better suited to be able to think about what long-term projects would look like. If the initial investment seems like it's something that we could get a number of different community members behind. I think that was part of our strategic plan, was finding ways in which that we could get the community involved in interesting projects that really could, transform the way in which we see ourselves as all partners in the SDMA. And we all got a role to play. So I just, playing off Mark's observation that there's a lot of land, and thinking about what's the best land use practice you can do with that, I would hope that we can be as creative as possible.
Charlie?
Couple of things, Chris. There's value in that timber out there besides the value of the timber, as in the carbon sequestration that's going on there. And so that's one thing that I would hope that you'd look into is how can we make sure that we manage that forest in a way that there is value, and I mean real dollars. Carbon credits are a possibility in something like that, so it's something to think about into the future. As far as that particular property, the place where the logging is going to go on, I don't know that that's the best place for solar necessarily, Chris, but I agree with you that there might be other things that would make sense there that would show more of a biodiversity, if you will. Certainly a possibility. If we're going to do the solar thing, which I'm all for, by the way, I'm thinking more at a place where we have a big open field, and we've got a few of those across the district. So I think that would make, if we're going to do a larger scale, I think that would make more sense. You could go into just a myriad of things in that clear cut. As Brian said, you could put in different types of timber, but also you could do grasses and some of those kinds of things that would sequester even more carbon and have more value. That's into the future a bit, but not all that far.
Amy?
Once upon a time, they tapped for maple sugar and syrup, and they made syrup because I know my husband went out there and did the stirring and kept it going, and then he filled jars and sold it, and that made money also. Put back into that. So that's another thing that can be done.
Well, thank you, Brian. Appreciate the report. Okay, we'll move on to discuss item E, discuss hiring practices in the SDMA. So, I would remind board members that this is not to include personal information or things, personnel in the district or otherwise. So, and I think we're all incumbent on each and every one of us to keep that in mind as we discuss this. Chris?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I suggested that maybe we would have Joe talk about some of these questions that seem to be important. And then Joe actually put that into a thoughtful email where he responded to a number of, actually all 6 of those questions. So I thought that since that being the case, since it would be redundant for Joe to repeat that information, unless he would like to give a synopsis of each of those 6 areas, and then we could discuss them as a board individually. If that were to be the case, then we'd have to suspend our normal rules for the way in which we'd have discussion, because we probably want to have discussion in each of those 6 areas. If that were not the board's pleasure, then maybe just a quick, brief reaction by each of the board members. We can go around and discuss these questions that seem to have been an important part of our community concern. If you would rather have me just talk for 3 minutes and 30 seconds, Dave, I can do that.
That's first time, I didn't know.
So the first thing I would say is that this might be a good time to take a more relaxed version of Robert's Rules of Order so that we can have adequate follow-up, but have everyone be mindful of being close to that 3 minute and 30 second cutoff.
3 minutes, not 3:30.
Like I said, that 3 minute cutoff. So should we,
Are you done with your
I'm making a motion that we suspend our rules of order and that we do a more friendly, relaxed version of rules for this discussion.
There's been a motion to suspend the rules. Is there a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second to suspend the rules for this agenda item. Jamie? If you vote yes, then we are allowing basically as much discussion as we need on this. If you vote no, then we will stick to 2 discussion times per person, up to 3 minutes each time. Jamie will now take the vote. Do you understand, Tanya?
Yes, I do.
Okay.
We'll start this one with Mark.
Clint, you were gone. Okay, let me refresh the motion on the floor. You snuck out stealthily.
Clarify it, I guess.
Yep, so we are on item 5E, hiring practices in the SDMA. We have a motion by Chris, a second by Amy, to suspend the rules for this motion. That would allow basically unlimited discussion on this. If the motion passes, if you vote yes, that's what we'll do. If it votes no, then we'll stick to the 2 times per board member, up to 3 minutes each time. So, understand?
Yeah, I'm wondering why we're suspending them, but, okay.
No discussion, sorry.
Yeah, I know, never mind.
Jamie, take the vote, please.
Mark Hillman.
No.
Tanya.
No.
Clint.
No.
Carl.
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
Charlie.
No.
Angie. No. David.
No.
Chris.
Yes.
Okay, motion fails 6-3. So we will have our standard discussion timeline for this motion. 2 minutes by each, or 2 times by each board member. Chris, you have 1 left. So
I have what?
you have 1 discussion time left on this motion.
Oh, I didn't feel like I had any discussion, you just had me introduce what we were talking about. And then I made a motion to suspend the discussion, but it wasn't actually
Okay.
germane to discussing what we were talking about.
Very good, I will allow it then. So, do you want to provide any backup, Joe, or do you want to start with discussion on it?
So would you like me just to go through the 6 questions and just kind of summarize each of them and then open it up for the discussion?
Yeah, but you've got 3 minutes.
I'm not bound by 3 minutes. Okay, so Chris submitted a number of questions, and I really appreciate Samantha White, our HR director. She helped put these answers together, and I appreciate the opportunity because I've seen a lot of the social media stuff, and there's some pretty big misconceptions out there that are very concerning, and I think some of them put the district in a bad light, and I don't think that should be the case at all with this situation. But the first one was talking about what's the board's explanation, understanding behind the virtual option for the 2020-2021 opening plan. And I don't know what the board's understanding was, but I can tell you very clearly that the virtual option was developed to provide families a choice. We wanted to make sure that families could choose either in-person or virtual instruction. Along with that, and we had lots of discussions at the board level, or lengthy discussion I should say, about trying to accommodate SDMA teachers as much as possible during the pandemic within the scope of the district's needs. All the teachers in the district were offered the opportunity to teach in the virtual program. Some of them, there's a whole wide variety of reasons why people may have chosen to do that. Some of it could be medical conditions or fear. Others may have just simply preferred virtual. Maybe it was family reasons. They might live outside the district and have children going to a school that was under a blended or virtual schedule, and it provided them with better flexibility. But regardless, all teachers in the district were provided that option if they wanted to apply for one of those positions, and medical documentation was not needed to be considered for the virtual program. We did have some interest in the district, but not enough. We ended up hiring several teachers from outside of the SDMA to staff the virtual option. There's a question about messaging from HR and if it was consistent in terms of the virtual positions. And what I would say is that the intent for staffing the virtual positions was very clear. It was just what I mentioned. It was to try to accommodate as many teachers as possible while providing the option for families. It was made clear that the district intended to provide continued teaching employment beyond 2020, 2021 for any of the teachers that were assigned to teach virtually during this school year. But it was also made clear that no specific teaching assignments were promised for that continued employment. In fact, the posting for these positions said, these postings will begin on August 18th, 2020, and will continue for the 2020-2021 school year only. Following the 2020-2021 school year, staff will have the option to return to a teaching position in the SDMA if the elementary education virtual learning teacher facilitator position is no longer needed. So we wanted to make it very clear that there was no promise that the virtual positions would be available beyond 1 year. And if they weren't available, we would provide opportunity for continued employment. There were a number of subsequent communications with the HR department. They did a great job answering teacher questions. And then also teachers who applied, they helped those teachers obtain licensure that might be necessary. We did have some teachers that were not licensed to teach in the elementary virtual program. However, we felt that if they had the qualifications and skill sets to do it, that we could support a provisional license, and that's something that our HR department helped those teachers facilitate. Despite the fact that the posting said that additional teaching positions would be considered if the program did not continue, and despite the fact that the program is going to continue next year, we still allowed teachers who were teaching virtually this year to apply and be considered for in-person teaching positions next year. So the next one talked about the difference between temporary teacher facilitator positions and permanent teaching positions. And I'm not quite sure where that came from, but there is no contractual difference. In our posting, we wanted to make it understandable that the positions we were looking for, they were teaching positions. It's a teaching contract, but the duties of that position were going to be a little bit different because we were using WVS, and the teacher would not be providing synchronous instruction. However, we needed a licensed teacher to oversee the programming and be the teacher of record for those students. But just like any other teacher position, all full-time teaching contracts are one-year contracts with annual renewal subject to state statute. So as promised, the teachers selected for the virtual teaching positions for this school year have been offered teaching contracts for next school year. Some of the virtual teachers that we will not need next year, based on the sign-up, we know we're not going to need nearly as many, have been provided notice of non-renewal. Those teachers who are not in the district prior to this school year. That same promise for continuing employment was not made for new instructors. It is not known what the district staffing needs will be after this school year and after next year, but job security for all teachers is dependent on the needs of the district and qualifications of the teachers, such as specific skill sets, certifications, training, performance evaluations, etc. So there is no permanent teaching contract. It's all one-year contracts. There was a question about how the emergency licenses were processed. Licensing is a function of the teacher. It's the teacher's responsibility to process that with the Department of Public Instruction. And these virtual licenses, or the elementary licenses, were processed the same way any other license is processed. The DPI requires each teacher to apply and pay for their own license. That being said, our HR department does a very good job answering questions and sharing information with teachers in terms of licensing, because it can be a little tricky to figure out sometimes. But the forms themselves are quite simple. It's just a matter of knowing what options are available. And a relatively newer license allows the district to work with teachers, and the district can request that a teacher be provided a provisional license. You used to be able to just get a 1-year provisional license, and then to renew that you would have to take 6 credits towards a program of study. But in recent years, you can now get a 3-year provisional license, and if the district signs off on it, that license could be renewed by showing a portfolio of work, successful work towards that. So Samantha White did a great job answering those questions for our teachers and advising teachers about what options were available, but it still was the teacher's decision in terms of which license they applied for. In terms of job security, the more licenses you have, the more positions you qualify for. So I do think it makes good sense for teachers if you're able to get additional licensure to apply for that license. Did the district follow rules regarding job postings, job qualifications, hiring decisions, and protocols for transfer? And I'm assuming that's with some of the recent hiring we've had, particularly some hiring at the middle school. And in terms of the middle school positions, we did have 2 teachers from the middle school that opted to work in the virtual program this year. And when they left the positions last summer, those positions were posted and they were filled prior to this school year. During the school year, we did receive written notification of assignment preference from teachers that were in those positions and from teachers who previously held those positions. So from our perspective, there was no need to post those positions. There was already qualified people, people that met the minimum qualifications of the teacher job description for our school district. And due diligence was completed by the leadership over at the middle school in terms of determining teacher assignments. So from that standpoint, I think people did a really nice job. And then there's a question about, did we take a permanent teacher and move them into a non-permanent temporary position? Is granting a teacher a teacher facilitator position equivalent to a teaching position, and how are they different? I guess I'd just start off by saying the board, which I assume is what we meant, did nothing with the assignment of teachers. That's not a board function. According to the employee handbook, teacher assignments are a function of the district administrator and or his designee. I typically don't make decisions about which teacher is going to teach in which position either. I typically rely on the principals and the hiring teams they put together, which often includes other teachers, to provide recommendations in terms of qualifications and best fit for those positions. And that's what happened with these positions as well. All requests made by SDMA teachers to be assigned to virtual teaching positions this year were granted. I already mentioned that. And the district did not move any teachers. You know, in terms of involuntary transfer or something like that, it was purely the teacher's choice whether or not they wanted to enter the virtual position for this school year. Again, contractually, a teacher facilitator position is the same thing as a teaching position within the district. There is no difference. All teaching contracts in the district are 1-year contracts. All virtual teachers assigned from the SDMA faculty were issued a teacher contract for next year, so that promise has been kept. And teachers assigned to teach virtually were provided their earned salary increases, not only in the contract they received for this school year, but also for the contracts they receive for next school year. So hopefully that helps clear up some of the questions. I know it's a lot, and I went through it pretty quick. So at this time, Dave, maybe there's some questions.
Okay, questions from the board? We have none. Chris?
Okay, well that was 10 minutes. So sometimes we have, some point we have to think about some equity in terms of talking time at the board. And I'll just go through these.
Just
I
interject.
try to read this as quickly as possible in 1 through 6. So the first question was the board well informed? And Joe said that the board was well informed, but we weren't. And then the one discussion, not the several discussions we had about the teaching position in virtual, apparently we got it wrong. Because we thought SHARE was about making a medical accommodation for compromised staff, as Charlie's extensive commentary illustrates. And if we had it wrong, you had an obligation to tell us we did. But you didn't. On 7/27, I asked you straight up if teachers were going to get their jobs back. That's that same meeting where we had a discussion. And you looked at me and you said, of course they're getting a job back. They didn't. So we weren't well informed. Number 2, consistent job posting. The job posting that you quoted, 6/29, was contradicted by your own words at 7/27, and contradicted by 6 emails exchanged between one of the teachers who applied for the exception and HR. In every one of these emails, it was stated this was a 1-year position, 1 year. And now it's a 2nd year for that person. On 7/20, quote unquote, this is a 1-year position, period. 1-year position, period. It's now a 2-year position. Difference between teacher facilitators and teachers, they're the same position. This is not true. There's a huge difference. In fact, the 8th grade language arts teacher position is going to be here after we're dead. The virtual position is done next year, and so is the teacher who's teaching them. Done. Number 4, the wishes of the teachers have been respected. No, they haven't been. The teacher clearly asked for a 1-year certification. He was given a 3-year certification and told that he needs to process that certification. Needs to. Needs, as in must. If you listen to his choices, that teacher would be in an 8th grade language arts position right now, because according to our contract, he was to be returned to the position in his licensure.
Point of order, are we talking about a specific issue here, or are we talking about generally our hiring practices?
General
I'm
hiring.
afraid we're going down a road that's going to get us into trouble in the future. I think we need to be careful that we don't continue down that road.
I agree, and that is all about process.
We'll talk about individual
Process.
teachers.
I'd like to get some time back on that.
I paused it, starting again.
Appreciate it.
We have
Was
25
policy followed? God, no. Joe just admitted that they decided to not follow policy because they thought they had enough qualified students or teachers, and he said that they have met the minimum qualifications, yet we're trying to hire the best teachers for those positions. He also states that this was a job that was the same job that was hired in 2020, 2021. That's not true. This is for a permanent job, and the hire for 2020, 2021.
Okay, Chris, your time is up for the first segment.
We were going to give people the opportunity to have a little bit of finish. I have about 10 seconds left.
You'll have another
Pardon me?
opportunity to speak after this, yeah.
That's not your general policy for how these are supposed to run, Dave.
I'm sorry, time's up. Amy.
First of all, I feel very undercutted by the board communication from the administration on this. When we first learned that there was going to be virtual positions open and teachers could take them, I was under the understanding that those teachers were going to get their jobs back. Now, you can prove, you can have blurb letters, you can say all of what you want in here. And yeah, it's true, it's true. But when it comes right down to it, I think it was a very mean and very vindictive thing that was done. And that's my opinion, it may not be the opinion, but I'm telling you, it's caused a lot of unrest in this community. Also, just to go back on the meeting, the first meeting in April, when we went ahead and voted on those hires, the person that was in the position for 8th grade language arts was moved into the social studies position. We voted on that, so I feel like it was that we voted on it under false pretenses. And because the very next day that teacher was moved. Also, in the interview process, given 24 hours and not a 5-day notice to prepare, I'm sorry, this does not look good to the district, it does not look good. I'm sorry to say. I don't think we're following our policies. I also don't think we're following our mission. You know, and to talk about the closed session, I mean that we're in slippery slope. Last meeting, we asked for a closed session, and everybody voted no, we weren't going to go into a closed session. So that's why we're having to do this open, because you guys voted, not me, but the rest of you voted by majority, not to take it to closed session. That's all I got to say. Thank you.
Joe?
Dave, I just want to say how frustrating and ridiculous it is for people to make it seem like the district did something improper. Our leadership team across the district, our leadership team in the buildings, have one purpose in mind, and that's to provide the best staff possible for our kids. And I can understand that someone who's not in the building every day, someone who, you know, might never have interviewed a teacher before, might have a difference of opinion. We all have friendships, we all have personal relationships, but to try to say that unrest was caused by the district is ridiculous, and it's just very unfortunate, the damage that some people are doing to our schools.
Any other board members? Charlie?
I just want to correct the record, Chris. During the discussion, when we were talking about accommodations, I never used the word medical purposefully. I was not thinking about it from a medical point of view. I don't believe that, I personally don't want to have someone be pigeonholed into that medical place if they don't want to. If they want to apply for a medical accommodation, that's great. But I don't want to tell them that they have to. This was more about, this could have been much more than just about medical. It could have been about some fears that they maybe had, or some family medical that wasn't related to them necessarily. So in my mind, it wasn't about medical, it was about somebody who wanted to go teach virtually so that they weren't in person. So don't put words into my mouth. I didn't say that, and I didn't intend that. As far as the licensure is concerned, obviously I wasn't involved in the process. I don't know how it went other than the emails. But for a teacher to get licensed, that's on the teacher. They sign off on it. It's their application for a license, not anyone else's in this room or any other room. It's up to that particular teacher, and if they sign up for a 3-year versus a 1-year, then so be it. That's on them, not on us, not on anyone else here.
Okay, at this point, I'd ask any other board members that have not spoken yet, if they care to speak. Tanya, Angie, Mark, Carl, or Clint?
No, I'm okay. Thank you for asking, Dave.
Okay.
I guess I just have one brief question, and this all transpired before 3 of us were on the board, so that puts us behind the 8 ball a little bit. I think it's the meeting before we were on the board, there was a position hired into social studies, which then it sounds like moved pretty quickly. So why did that position come under social studies to that prior meeting?
So I'm not going to speak to any specific person, but what I can tell you is that if our principals have the opportunity to hire a teacher that they think is a great teacher, and they think there's a position that fits that teacher, they will hire that person. But that doesn't preclude that person from requesting assignment in a different position. But in order to do due diligence, depending on timing of hiring, sometimes you would run the risk of losing a teacher altogether, not knowing what the result of the assignment would be for the secondary position. So I think it was done very well to secure the employment of a terrific teacher and then do due diligence and have a team determine where that teacher would be assigned.
Angie, did you have something? Chris?
And I'm not going to debate about what people said, because that meeting's online. So is the emotion that was behind it. So if you wanted to cast that in a different light, it's for our constituents to figure out. if we're being held accountable for our own words. I think the thing that I really wanted to kind of come back to was that when Charlie is saying that it's on teachers, it's their fault. If something bad happened to that teacher because of a process, we put them down and gave them an outcome after 6 years.
Hey, let's keep this.
That was unfortunate.
Yeah,
Can do. But that's putting an awful lot on our teachers. You know, that time we've been asking a lot of our teachers to hold them accountable for questioning the directions they're given by administration, to hold them accountable for processing their paperwork, also take care of their family, adjusting to new teaching positions, adjusting to all the things that this district and this board has asked them to do. And now we don't owe them anything to make sure that we're looking out for them. That ain't right. It's not right at all.
Okay, Joe.
I'm so sick of people making it seem like the district doesn't care about our teachers. We've been over backwards to try to provide opportunity for people who needed, wanted, preferred to teach virtual this school year. Purposefully, we took extra steps to help people not licensed for positions get licensed so that they could teach in a position they wanted to teach in. What if we were sitting here today and there was no vaccine available? What if we were sitting here today and there were 4 new variants that were more deadly, more dangerous, more contagious? Would we be saying that, no, too bad, so sad, you had your chance? We can't have it both ways. Either we empower our building leadership and hiring teams to hire the people they think are the best fit for those positions, or we don't. But to try to classify this as not looking out for them, I mean, come on. That's insulting to me. It's insulting to our principals. It's insulting to our HR directors. It's insulting to everyone here who cares so much about our teachers and our kids. And
You are not the victim.
Chris,
I was responding to Charlie.
Chris, you're out of order.
Collins is the victim. You guys are impossible. You can never admit me to something wrong.
Joe.
Thank you, Tom.
Any other board members? Amy?
Why would somebody deny somebody who works so hard at making sure that we follow our mission statement? Somebody who worked hard to make sure that students felt included. I don't get it, and I never will.
Angie?
I guess I would just like it to stand for the record that all of the documentation that I have seen from HR, all of the teachers were given the same information. All of the teachers were informed that they would not be guaranteed the same position following this virtual. They made the decision to then do so or not do so. This whole notion and all the social media bashing and that has gone on, I think it's been very unfair. And I would like to say also super disrespectful to our HR department, to the superintendent, to all of the principals. Teachers were interviewed and they selected the best teacher for the job. And I'm sorry that the teacher that you wanted for the job didn't get selected. But at the end of the day, it's done, it's over with. And we need to support our staff, we need to support our principals, we need to support our departments here because that's what we're here as a board to do and quit attacking everyone.
You've had 2 times, Amy, sorry. Anybody else? Okay. We'll move on to item I, policy 171.2, agenda preparation and dissemination. First reading.
So Dave, I know you and I talked about the agenda requests, and one thing that I think you all know how to request an agenda item, and board members submit an agenda item by the Wednesday prior to the next Monday meeting. And we've had a few situations now where it's after the work day, and all of a sudden we'll receive sometimes 3 or 4 agenda items, and sometimes with very little background. And it's very difficult to try to process that when we get it that late. Most board members do a great job. We know when agenda items are coming. Background a lot of times is gathered, for days or even weeks ahead of time. This might seem like it doesn't take a lot of planning to have a meeting, but the amount of planning that goes in this meeting these meetings are hours and hours and hours. So anyway, I know Dave and I were talking about it, and what we would love to have the agenda item requests as early as possible, by having them by at least noon on the Wednesday prior would make it much more manageable, because there are things that need to be done in terms of the legalities of posting the meetings and figuring out where they would fit into the agenda and such. So you can see there that we have a first reading of adding the time noon, 12 p.m., 5 days or more prior to the meeting. I don't know if there are any other suggestions for improving that policy.
I guess I'll speak to this from my standpoint. I think it's good to get these in a little bit sooner than we have been. We've had quite a bunch coming in late Wednesday afternoon or early evening, and it just makes it tough when the board docs has to go out on Thursday to try to go through the request. One thing, Tanya, for you, since you're not here at the meeting, just to point out, Chris did leave the meeting, just for your information.
Oh, great. Thanks for letting me know.
Yep. Any questions on this agenda item or improvements or things people would like to change?
Dave, can I just ask for this one? This is also the policy that we were going to, when we have an agenda, that we should also be including like documentation and, I don't want to say intentions, but at least like it's informational or discussional or information gathering or just some more details that us as board members can properly organize. So like when we see an agenda item, we kind of have an idea of like what alley we should be going down if we're searching and preparing ourselves. That making sense to my question?
Yeah, I sometimes wonder if it wouldn't be better if we had a form that we had to fill out to fill in the blanks type of thing to hit
Sure.
the main things. I'm not sure. It makes it a little tough. Sometimes it feels like it's a judgment call on my part if the boxes have been checked and things have been done. Whereas if we could make it a little bit clearer. I think having more time will help, just to be able to disseminate it and have the interaction with the person who sent stuff in. But yeah, this is the policy that we went through, I think it was last updated in September of 2020.
Question. Is that the sort of thing, does board docs have a form you could build that we could just submit with those fields through board docs?
Carl, I don't think we would run through board docs, but we could create a Google form or something of that nature if you think it would be helpful.
I like the idea. Helps you not forget, a lot of items. And I like the noon time too.
Sometimes I get busy on the farm, and I don't always check my email every few minutes, and so this one I didn't catch till it was a little after 5, and by then Joe was gone. But just I think it'd be helpful. Clint.
Along those lines, I will say on Monday afternoon, I know there's probably some of this that's unavoidable, but when I'm getting ready to come here and I fire up my computer, make sure it's charged, and I get a notice that says there has been a change to an active agenda item, it is very difficult for someone who's working full-time to stay caught up on that. And It's not Janie's fault, Janie's the one that sends it out. Not much longer, right, Jamie? But it is very difficult because, to be honest, myself personally, I try to catch up with this stuff over the weekend. Usually Sunday afternoon is my last ditch, try to get caught up for the week and know what we're doing. So the more this stuff gets delayed, that is very much a challenge. I know we're all very busy. And then the other side of the coin is, I don't want to limit things so much because we definitely need to make sure that we're available, transparent, and able to present information to the board that represents our community as well. So I think it's fair as long as we set a guideline that maybe, I like the noon idea to be honest, but just making sure that we're clear on that. And then anything that comes in after that deadline absolutely is not acceptable. No exceptions.
It was tough before because it said 5 days before the meeting. Well, that's, you know.
Midnight.
Yeah. Or you could say 5:30 if you wanted to go 24-hour days before. So it was kind of vague. So it'd be nice to have the timeline. As far as the Google form, Charlie?
Is it possible, although I like it, is it possible to have a no exceptions rule? It seems like there might be something come in on a Thursday that would be a disciplinary action or something like that that maybe would have to be added later. Is that true?
Yeah, I would caution the no exceptions rule. Things do come up.
I'm sorry. Amy, I think was first.
There is a clause in there that says if there's an emergency situation, you can waive the 5 days, in fact, up to 24 hours, and even shorter than that if it's an emergency.
Just for clarification, I do understand that because I know a lot of them actually, it seems like it's hiring season when they come through because it's kind of last minute personnel stuff that maybe comes through and we have to vote on before the next meeting. Heaven forbid though, we have to have a special meeting. I know that would be tough to work on people's schedules, but there is a time and place sometimes for those as well.
Would it just be fair to say if the item can wait until a subsequent meeting, it should? You know, if we're past that Wednesday, you know, if this person has to be hired before the next school board meeting, then that would be an allowable add-on. If it could wait to the following scheduled meeting, we might as well let it go. That kind of mindset.
Yep, I think that'd be fair. As far as the Google form, Joe, is that something you could do up? Or?
Yeah, I would say we could start by having an exhibit, and that exhibit could go into board docs. So then, like Carl said, at least you have, you know, if you're going to request an agenda item, you can look at the exhibit and, all right, here's everything you need. And then I think maybe we can talk some more. I'm not opposed to doing a Google form, but maybe an exhibit would suffice.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't need to create more work than it needs to either. That's not my intention.
Well, I just sometimes do those forms and they are limiting, you know, even though it's meant to be helpful, it can limit. Because a lot of times these items are very complex and can have multiple layers in them with attachments and all sorts of stuff.
Anything from Angie or Mark? You other guys have nothing? Okay. So.
And Dave, I just want to reiterate, most of the time, board members are really good about agenda requests. It's somewhat of an isolated situation, but it's just repeated itself a number of times recently. So thank you to the board members who make their requests in such good fashion.
So will we bring it again back next month, or in 2 weeks then?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Item J, review 171.2 exhibit agenda format.
So this is the meeting format, and this is just a review. This does not require board action, but if we're going to change the exhibit, we want to make sure that the board is fully informed. As you were notified, the School Board Association is suggesting that we do not include an item called Board Superintendent Communications. It runs the risk of violating the open meetings law. It's not very specific in terms of what would be discussed under that agenda item. So we plan to update the exhibit after tonight and no longer include that item on the board agenda. If there's a specific topic of interest, a board agenda request would be the appropriate way to have that.
Any questions? Okay. Item K, review policy 346 rule guidelines for maintenance and confidentiality of student records.
There's not many changes here. I appreciate Tony taking the lead on this, just to make sure that our policies and rules are compliant and up to date. And in terms of directory data, it's been recommended that, or required that email address is also included in the directory data designated by the board, to include a student's name, address, telephone listing, and now email address, date and place of birth, participation in officially recognized activities in sports, weight and height, and members of athletic teams, dates of attendance, and the name of the school most recently attended by the student. So the email address is the part that is now added to that.
Carl?
Is it school email address, Joe, versus private email address?
School email address.
School email, yeah.
Thanks, Tony.
I see the other change was notice to be sent out the next working day instead of 5 business days. Does that have to do with the email?
That has to do with sending educational records from one school to the other. There was a change in statute that requires us to do that at a faster rate,
Okay.
so that it benefits the students, so there's not a delay in enrollment at the next school that they're trying to enroll into. So,
Thank you.
yep.
Any other questions?
So Dave, the next item then is just updating the district exhibit to match the rule.
Okay, so nothing we need to talk about then. Okay, item M. Our next board meeting is May 24th at 5:30. Graduation will be on the 30th of May, and our last day of school is June 3rd. Who thought we'd be staying the way everything's done?
Oh my gosh.
Well, okay, motion to adjourn.
I'll move to adjourn.
Charlie, is there a second?
I'll second.
Mark?
Yes.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
We stand adjourned.